Niche, underrated, unknown, hidden indie gems. If you're anything like me, an avid enjoyer of indie games, then you, like me, also might believe that these words or any grouping of these words have become ever so slightly overused. Maybe misused might be more accurate. You see, there's no harm in highlighting indie games in any capacity, but there's really only so many times you can read or watch somebody introduce and recommend some of gaming's biggest indie darlings as a niche hidden gem. So, what exactly determines something as a hidden gem? Honestly, I have no clue. For simplicity, I'll be using an easy-to-determine value, that being the number of Steam reviews, but even that won't always paint the full picture. I know of at least one game that's hit 1,000 reviews, yet is hardly ever talked about. But that's for another video. For this video, I'll be showing only games that fall under 100 reviews, with many of them hardly even getting close. Which unfortunately means that my favorite niche hidden indie gem just barely didn't make the cut. So without further ado, here's 7 games that actually fit this description. Except for maybe underrated, as they're almost all positively reviewed. Fast-paced and precise 2D platforming is what one can expect while indulging in GHOULSCRAPERS, a game that follows a young girl by the name of Eggroll, who upon learning she owes the government a gazillion dollars in unpaid taxes, becomes the newest employee at the GHOULSCRAPERS company in order to pay off her crippling debt. And so, with charming pixel art visuals and accompanying chiptune soundtrack as the foundation, our main gal, Eggroll here, must delve into an assortment of haunted locales to bust ghosts while dressed in appropriate ghost-busting attire. And of course, being equipped with the tool that's become a staple of any noteworthy ghoul hunter's arsenal, a gun. So with that said, it's time to ghost bust a cap in some spirits, and more importantly, jump and shoot your way through these spooky spaces, like the Crimson Bastion or Cookie Crust Factory. Each of these locations often has a single gimmick to it, and they're all accessed by this cute little 3D world map that I adore. The overall difficulty of the game feels quite balanced, if not a bit easy if you frequently 2D or platformers, though there is just enough skill expression for it to feel good, with some additional challenges and tasks to tackle along with additional gals dressed in humorous attire to unlock, and a fish. For some reason. His name is probably something like General Chicken with Rice. Succulent Chinese meals aside, for $5 you'll likely get anywhere from 1 to 3 hours of gameplay depending on your platformer prowess, or more if you feel like suffering and attempt to beat all the dev times for each level. Side note, the lead developer, Shortcake Cafe, also created Rabbit Hole, a surprisingly difficult roguelite that might not fall under 100 reviews, but it's completely free and also worth your time. In my opinion, if you like roguelites. Anyways, that's enough about Eggroll, it's time to move on to Eggroll. On the Ground. Foul Damage, developed by May Gardens and Red Nexus Games Inc., is a 2D puzzle platformer all about rolling around as an incredibly fragile egg. How fragile? Very. Which is very unfortunate given how surprisingly high this little egg can jump. This fragility is basically the core that all gameplay is built around, the yolk, if you will, and you'll want to carefully traverse the many environments to make sure yours doesn't spill out. Now you're probably wondering just how much content can really be made about being a rather mobile little egg. Well, the answer is a lot. A shocking amount, to be honest with you. To the point where every time I was met with a brand new area, rather than credits rolling, I was genuinely surprised. More often than not, each new area will also introduce a new mechanic or two to help or hinder this little egg on its journey to somewhere. The game itself will likely run you anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, and that's not even taking into consideration the fact there's a collection of colorful feather collectibles to collect. The pink feathers are often easier to find, and the total amount is shown per location, while the less common green feathers are not. Bit of an odd choice, honestly, but it does add to the enjoyment of stumbling across one. There's also a rather competent level editor that gives access to a majority of the game's existing mechanics, falling upon the community to keep the egg rolling, as that famous turn of phrase goes. Now, 15 bucks could be seen as on the slightly steeper side for some, so with that in mind, there is a demo available if you'd like to sample before you buy. Also, funny enough, this was the game with the most reviews, sitting at 99 reviews at the time of writing this, and probably surpassing that by the time this video is out. Please ignore this fact, but all in all, it's an excellent game. I want you to know it took a lot of self-restraint to not include any other egg-based puns in this section, and I hope you've come to respect me more as an individual for it. Now I know what you're thinking. Jesus Christ, what the Oh great, we're 2 indie games deep and it's nothing but pixel art 2D platformers, I understand. So just for you, here's something slightly different. A niche, unknown 3D Souls-like. So niche, you haven't even seen it on one of them Iron Pineapple videos, and that's saying a lot. Dead Ink is a game that takes place in the year 2207, but you probably wouldn't have guessed that from the visuals and environment. That's because you were a test pilot for a highly advanced off-world consciousness transfer experiment with your mind being encoded down into photons and beamed across the cosmos in what was supposed to be a glorious new age of lightspeed travel. Though it clearly didn't work as intended because you ended up lost in some strange darkness, only waking up as your body is 3D printed from this pool of yellow ink. This strange place you've unfortunately gotten stuck in is some massive tower in the middle of nowhere that stretches far up into the sky, and you'll have to traverse it in hopes of finding a way off it and off this world. This verticality is, to put simply, fantastic, and the scale of the tower itself feels great. You really feel the sheer size of it while exploring, with what are basically small subregions making up the entire structure, with unique enemies to match. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk combat. Of course, there's the ever-reliable dodge roll, made slightly more dangerous given the precarious environment, and every single weapon in the game has a main and alt attack with varying damage and attack patterns. More important than you might think, especially for enclosed areas. There's a shield that can block a set amount of damage, and of course there's a parry, which is interestingly completely separate from the shield. This means you can somehow pull off bare-handed parries. I will say that the lack of a stamina bar does mean it's incredibly easy to dance around opponents, and once competent, utterly humiliate them via parries. Side note, the parry can also be used to simply shove. I'm sure you can guess what use this might have. A use that not even bosses are immune to, as Mr. Newton does not play favorites. Something I haven't mentioned is that your weapons, much like the very body you control, are made of ink. In fact, everything is ink, from you to your consumables. These print stations, which act as the bonfires of this Souls-like, are where you'll equip yourself with gear using blueprints you've found throughout the tower. You wouldn't download a car, but a kick-ass halberd? That's a different story. Of course, nothing is without cost, with every piece of equipment or consumable you print in with using the print station's ink supply. A supply that can be exhausted, meaning you'd lose access to spawning in from that station until you make a trip to refill it with more ink. This means that permadeath is technically possible if you somehow manage to fuck up to such a monumental degree. Additionally, these ink delivery trips are something you'll have to do often, as there's only one spot where blueprints can be upgraded. From giving yourself more health, strengthening your weapons, to even improving the potency of repair kits. Upgrading is incredibly powerful, but equally costly. One last thing I appreciate is that while you drop like a bag of bricks off ledges, it makes it incredibly clear as to where you can and can't drop down. You quickly learn what is and isn't a safe height, which prevents confusion on the places you can go, further helped by the lack of a jump button. If I had to do jumping parkour, I think I would have willingly become a yellow splatter on the lowest floor. With that said, if you're looking for a polished Souls-like with unique gameplay elements and an excellent environment, I'd give it a try. Or try the demo first and wait for a sale if 20 bucks is a hard sell. Personally, I'd love to see more content for the game. I'd dive right into a second tower if it was added. Wait. Pause. Jokes like that are probably going to get my ass sent to hell, which is conveniently where this next game takes place. FOWL Legacy. I don't know how I ended up with 2 games in here that both start with FOWL, That's just how it happened. But anyways, in this 3D platformer collectathon, you'll don the feathers of one badass chicken named Ricardo, who's been sent to hell for being a bad boy and disrespecting his farmer. But Ricardo ain't just going to take that lying down. So now he'll have to traverse through the many landscapes of hell in order to ring hell's bells, all while making sure to stock up on his collection of corn orbs, or corbs as they're commonly known. From ancient deserts under the watchful gaze of silent eyes to frigid floating islands of ice connected together with some sick-ass grind rails, it'll be quite the journey to ring all the bells. A journey that's rich with hidden secrets just waiting to be found, with an extra special note of the sleepwalkers tucked away into the corners of each environment. Traversing these environments is also made quick and efficient with a simple movement system, though there are one or two tricks that can be pulled to speed things up. Same can be said for these strange power orbs spread across the levels that aid in traversal one way or another. And finally, once all the bells ring out, this signals that it's time to take on the big bad boss of hell found at the front desk. I won't go into this final fight too much, but I will say that it's 80% aura and hype moments and roughly 20% boss fight. But it's still worth it. Free my boy Ricardo. They got his feathery ass on charges of being sick as hell. So, a silly little collectathon that doesn't take itself too seriously, with an assortment of secrets that'll run you about 2 hours on the low end and significantly more if you're thorough. For $5, hard to go wrong there. Now that's enough 3D for me. It's time to return to indies as God intended, with crisp, beautiful pixel art. This is Tower, or TWWWR, or TWWWR, as it's called by absolutely nobody. I hope. A short, relatively linear bullet hell platformer about climbing a tower. A tower that's split up into multiple layers with each acting as a different zone, with different enemies to match. All of it which is rendered in this absolutely lovely pixel art style that I can't get enough of. Seriously, if only the lead developer made any other games. Wouldn't that be great? But I digress. Let's get back on topic to those enemies, or more importantly, dealing with those enemies. This is done through just a single gun, one that can be fired rapidly or charged up for a shotgun-like blast. Of course, the enemies don't exactly take kindly to getting shot at, fighting back in a variety of ways. Now, a gimmick of this game is the fact that orange attacks can be jumped over while anything else can't be. This can take some getting used to, given the fact it's difficult to determine where you are in the air at times, especially during the particularly intense boss fights, but once you've got it down, it's a very interesting mechanic. Now, fighting these enemies might be a bit tough, but thankfully your rather pitiful little character and weapon can be buffed up with a variety of trinkets, either found tucked away throughout the tower or purchased from this friendly shopkeeper, with the typical limited amount of slots to utilize. The effects of these trinkets can range from improving your character's movement or HP, buffing your gun with longer range, faster charge time, poison-tipped bullets, and more, or even affecting enemies themselves, reducing the speed of their bullets, or simply turning half of them into harmless flowers. A small thing that's not too meaningful in gameplay, but I think is fantastic nonetheless, is the fact that a lot of these trinkets will have a visual change. Long-range bullets are pointed, while poison rounds are tinted purple, and this stacks. You'll leave a mushroom trail behind you with the boots that increase your movement speed, and the multiple trinkets that increase bullet damage actively increase the size of the bullets themselves to signify this. Honestly, I just think it's kinda neat, and it's something I always like to see in games to show what buffs are active. But that aside, this isn't the end of upgrades to be obtained. There's extra challenges to tackle, along with buffed up versions of previously fought bosses that are far from easy, both of which provide currency, trinkets, and some extra special rewards. But I'll leave that up to you to discover, along with the secret side quests that may or may not lead to a unique ending. There's also difficulty settings which just increase or decrease your max health, with the highest difficulty meaning you'll get one shot by every enemy, only for the most dedicated, and I really wanted all those achievements. In terms of bullet hells, it's far from the hardest game out there, but the charming visuals, build variety with the trinkets, and fun fights make it well worth the $4 price tag. Now, I lied to you. Indies, as God intended, aren't made with pixel art. because they're actually made with slightly blocky but charming low-fidelity 3D models with pixel art textures reminiscent of the PS1 era of video games. Better also slap on a mosaic filter just to really sell the idea. I'm mostly just poking fun. However, this next game in question, Brush Burial, on release, did have a rather intense pixelation effect that had its moments of being a bit too much. Thankfully, with the release of the Brush Burial But Better update, this was significantly toned down, alongside some greatly appreciated quality of life changes. Though that's getting ahead, let's take a few steps back. I didn't mean physically. Why are you like this? Brush Burial is an immersive sim, taking heavy inspiration from the immersive sims of days long since past, which is something the sole developer of Knife Demon Software, a very fitting name by the way, is quite forward about. However, unlike those fossils of history, you're not some simple thief or a stoic, heavily augmented individual. You see, you're actually a knife-wielding swamp devil by the name of FOWL, who's very nimble, possesses an incredibly dexterous tail, and a keen pair of eyes for treasure. Make that 4 pairs of eyes. She's been sent to this place in order to hunt down the witch god Yenulok, and in return her own god has promised her a sacred right of eternal rest. Of course, you can't just dive into witch god hunting right away. There's an order to these things. An order that starts with infiltrating a bustling den of thieves, murderers, scoundrels, a whole assortment of malicious individuals really. Now the method of infiltration is up to the player. Real immersive in that way. Be that sneaking through vents, utilizing silenced weapons or sneaky stabs to stealthily take out threats as you skulk about the place, or by rushing in, slaughtering anything that moves with swords, maces, guns, grenades. You get the picture. Combat in Brush Burial is either a dance that's filled with dodges, parries, and skillful stabs, or it's pure brute force if you've gotten your 3-fingered hands on a proper weapon that isn't a kitchen knife. Regardless of your choice, while traversing this den you'll be on the lookout for gems and coins, which can be sold or spent to buy an assortment of weapons, tools, foods, and beverages at this mysterious shopkeep who seems decent enough. But more importantly, you'll be searching for these purple flowers which you'll need to open up this portal back at the start of the level to reach Act 2. Now, Act 2 is a significant shift in gameplay compared to Act 1, being almost entirely just puzzles or parkour. I won't spoil much about this act or the one that follows, I'll simply say this. Exhaust all NPC dialogue. Talk to this guy, talk to your weird god and learn how these runes work. Then, and only then, should you dive down into the well and traverse the strange place that is the baths. With all that said, and even with the fixes brought on by the Brush Burial But Better update, there's definitely aspects of the game itself that not everyone will click with. The inventory system can feel restrictive at first and a pain to sift through, though this gets easier with experience. Parrying is also a bit odd in the fact it's only done after an enemy attack. And finally, the second act will still likely push away many players despite the improvements and added clarity. But these are far from major downsides, and for just $7, I think it's an excellent little immersive sim. I just feel like more could have been done with it. Which is exactly what its sequel, Brush Burial 2, is seemingly doing. It's still deep in development, however there is a playable demo over on itch.io that is absolutely fantastic and is already making big strides compared to the first game. FOWL is back and looking better than ever, with a planned outfit customization system in the works. What's the point of custom outfits? It's so you can look fine as hell while executing these brand new takedowns. God damn, it should have been me. At this point I'm starting to think that 50% of development time is going into these takedown animations, and honestly the developer is real as hell for that. This single demo plays out much more like a typical immersive sim level, having a single goal with a variety of ways to approach it. Stealing keys, busting open vents, and taking anything that isn't nailed down, while choking out any jacket-wearing goon you come across on your way to fold their big boss like an omelet. I won't go into this too much, just know that if you've played Brush Burial or think it looks cool, then I'd strongly recommend checking out this demo for its sequel. And now, we reach the final game in this little video of mine. For this last one, I wanted to cover something a little odd, a little rough around the edges, and maybe not even truly a good game, but I think it's neat. Now, everything I say about this game is spoiling the overall experience, so I'll simply start by saying that if you like weird little top-down RPGs with interactive visual novel elements built purely off vibes and possible trauma, and you've got $3 lying around, then check out Oath. And also, give me the numbers on the back of your credit card. For those who aren't easily manipulated and persuaded with just words, allow me to offer even more words and some visuals to accompany them. Oath is maybe a game, possibly. It's an experience more than anything. There's very little in terms of actual gameplay, and it's got some very rough edges. But you can feel the passion in the visuals and writing, and there's so many personal little inclusions that this almost feels like something made just for the developers themselves or close friends. Just a way for them to express their feelings and interests. And hidden within is so many goddamn secrets. I realize that this hasn't done much to really explain the game in the slightest. Well, this is the story of two people. The events of the story can't be changed. Your choices don't matter. Or do they? What might at first seem like a hopeless struggle, a place you're trapped in with no way out, no way to refuse or say no, might have another path you can take. For those who are willing to try, and for those who want to believe, to find a way out. The choice is yours to make, so decide for yourself if it's worth the cost. So with that as the closing title, you've reached the end. I appreciate you sticking around, and I do hope you've enjoyed this assortment of truly niche, unknown, underrated, hidden indie gems. Hopefully at least one of them caught your attention like they caught mine. This is the first video of this kind I've made, but if it wasn't obvious from my channel, I often talk about lesser-known games, and this was honestly an excellent way to highlight a bunch of them that maybe couldn't fill a full video by themselves. If you want to see more, do let me know, as there's truly no shortage of cool little games that barely anyone talks about. With all that said and done, thank you for watching. Thank you to all the developers for putting their passion into these games, and of course, thank you all my generous patrons for funding these videos. With special thanks to Rody, Mirloon, Yuval, Michael Bradley, Beano S, Wobble Wobble, EP Sprite, Blue Stop Sign, Luvok T. Skelliman, and Sven. Patrons get their names here at the end, early access to these videos, exclusive access to video updates, posts, polls, and more. If that sounds interesting, or you just want to support the channel, do consider it. But if nothing else, like and subscribe. Until next time.